Welcome to Larry the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. On today's episode, let's discuss the 1984 album from Armored Saint, March of the Saint. This is their first full-length studio album. They would get their start on, I believe it was the second Metal Massacre from Metal Blade Records, and then they would release this EP in 1983 on Metal Blade. But then they would jump right to the majors, and I think Armored Saint is an interesting band. I'm going to be seeing them this coming weekend. I'm going to see Wasp, and they're opening up for Wasp. I've seen Armored Saint before, but I'm looking forward to hearing them again. And they're an interesting band for me because, for one, they come from LA, and they were there during when the whole glam metal thing was exploding. But they didn't do that sound. They stuck with this straight up kind of traditional metal type of sound, new wave of British heavy metal influenced type of thing. When I think of American metal, Armored Saint is one of the bands that I think of because they're just straight up the middle, classic heavy metal. There's times where they can play fast and it's on the verge of being speed metal, but not quite. For me, it's just straight up the middle, classic American steel. Could have dubbed this episode American Steel, and even their look, all the glam bands doing their thing at the time. They had a kind of an outrageous look, but it sits squarely within the traditional metal template. And their sound, they have a very, you hear some new wave of British heavy metal in there, maybe like some UFO, that type of sound, but it's just very classic sounding metal. And it's interesting to me why they never broke bigger than they did. And I think because they're on Chrysalis Records, a major record label for their first album, so there was money behind them. I'm assuming that there was a promotional push. There was a video for "Can You Deliver" from this album that I remember seeing on MTV, but they never really sort of crossed over into that, into the bigger leagues or being more popular. And some of it I think was maybe timing. 1984, Kill 'Em All came out in '83, so the metal sound, the guard is changing here and it's moving into the thrash sound. Maybe if they had come out a couple years earlier with this record, it might have been more successful. And they never really had that song that, I like to use Accept's Balls to the Wall as an example. That's a song that even if you were just a casual MTV metal fan, LA glam metal fan, you only watched MTV and you only knew that stuff, you would know Balls to the Wall because they played that video like crazy. They used that image of Udo on the wrecking ball for commercials. You'll sometimes hear Balls to the Wall like at a sporting event. So it's sort of one of those songs that even if you may not even know who did it, if you're only just a casual 80s fan, you were a teenager in the 80s during the MTV metal era, you would most likely still recognize Balls to the Wall. But Armored Saint never really had that. They never really had that song, which is a shame because they're a great band and I really love this record. Maybe it's dated itself a little bit. When I did my Sabotage Hall of the Mountain King, some people commented that, that album felt sort of dated with the lyrics and everything. And maybe this does a little bit too, but it's still fun and I love revisiting because for me, again, it's just kind of straight up the middle, classic early 80s American steel, American metal. The band, John Bush on vocals. He would go on to sing with Anthrax through the 90s and early 2000s. Great voice. He's got range, but some heft and power to his voice. Joey Vera on bass, who in my opinion is a very underrated 80s metal bass player. He has a great sound, real mid-rangey, punchy sound that jumps out of the mix, and he does all these cool bass fills and everything. Phil Sandoval and Dave Picard on lead guitar. The guitars are classic metal in the style of Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, some harmonies here and there. Great guitar sounds. And Gonzo Sandoval on drums. Great playing from everybody. The album is produced by Michael James Jackson, and I was kind of surprised to read that the band didn't like the production on this album. They thought it was a little too slick, a little too commercial sounding, but I think it sounds great. It's nice and warm. You can hear all the instruments, very, very crankable. You can tell that there was money spent on it to make it sound really nice. So for me, I think it sounds great, and it dates itself a little bit, like maybe in the drum sounds, kind of, but I think that it's held up very, very well. The album starts with March of the Saint. It's got this cool intro to it that is very fanfare-like, medieval fanfare that fits the cover of the album and just the feel of the whole thing. It's a fast, upbeat one that's really cool. Can You Deliver, I mentioned earlier, they had a video for this one. Classic 80s metal, fist in the air. You know, the video's got the kids in the crowd and everything. It's just, you know, again, straight up 80s metal. You want to sort of sing along with the chorus. Cool, like mid-tempo driving main riff. Madhouse is a fun one. It's fast. It makes me think of kind of Motorhead a little bit. It's got kind of that vibe to that fast kind of Motorhead thing. Again, they play fast like a March of the Sane and Madhouse and some of the other ones, but they never really, they get close to that speed metal sound, but they still sort of keep it within that traditional metal, you know, fast like what we would hear from Judas Priest. That kind of fast. Take a Turn is one that's a little bit more laid back. I kind of wish maybe there was a little bit more of this on the album. One's a little bit slower, has a little bit of a moody intro. Wish there was a little bit more of that. Side 2, Mutiny on the World, Glory Hunter, Stricken by Fate, all good stuff. Envy, False Alarm, I think is a pretty cool one. It's got a riff in it that really reminds me of the middle section of Diary of a Madman. Maybe another complaint that I would have is that the lyrics are a little, they don't stand out a whole lot to me, or as much as I would like them to. I wish that maybe they had dabbled a little more in the fantasy world with their lyrics. You know, you get sort of a lot of kind of straight up the middle type of lyrics, you know. I mean, they're cool, but I just wish that maybe they had gone more into the fantasy realm. And with the album cover and everything, you know, it might have dated the record. You know, I talked about Sabotage and Hall of the Mountain King and how some of those lyrics maybe date the record, but I like that. To me, these lyrics just at times just don't jump out at me as much, especially on side 2 when we get into like a Glory Hunter and Envy. Just kind of doesn't jump out at me as much as I might like it to. But all right, there you go. Armored Saint, March of the Saint, great classic American steel, classic early 80s LA type of metal. Not, you know, it's funny, there weren't a whole ton of bands doing this kind of sound. You know, everybody was moving towards the glam and that kind of that sound, you know, but Armored Saint stuck to their guns here and went with this real, just classic traditional metal. All right, so let me know in the comments what you guys think of Armored Saint, March of the Saint. Has anybody out there seen Wasp and Armored Saint? All my friends on Facebook are talking about. They're making their way up the East Coast, headed towards Florida. So I'm seeing all my friends talk about it. Have you guys seen the show? What did you think of Armored Saint? What did you think of Wasp? All right, let me know in the comments down below. Check out my socials. Till we see you again, make sure you stay heavy, stay metal.